My name is Paige Tanner, and I'm 34 years old. 6 weeks after giving birth to my daughter Nora, I was lying flat on a hospital gurney with a broken collarbone, two cracked ribs, and a phone pressed against my ear, begging my own mother to go pick up my newborn from my neighbor's house. The accident happened on a Tuesday morning. I'd left Nora with my neighbor Diane just to run a quick errand. Formula, a few groceries, maybe 20 minutes round trip. A driver ran a red light on Clearwater Avenue and hit the driver's side of my car so hard that I blacked out before the airbag even fully deployed. I came to with paramedics leaning over me and someone asking me who they should call. I gave them my mother's number without even thinking twice. That's what you do, right? You call your parents. You assume they'll come. I was still in triage when my mother finally picked up. I told her everything as calmly as I could, that I was at St. Augustine Medical, that I was going to be admitted, that Nora was with Diane on Fern Court and needed to be picked up within the hour. My mother went quiet for a second. Then she said she needed to talk to my father. I sat there in a hospital gown, holding my phone with a shaking hand, listening to muffled voices on the other end of the line. When she came back, her tone had already shifted. She said they had plans. A dinner reservation they'd been looking forward to for weeks. She said I should call a babysitting service. I thought I'd heard her wrong. I asked her to repeat herself. She did. I told her Nora was 6 weeks old. 6 weeks. She wasn't some toddler who could wait a few hours in someone else's house. She was a newborn who needed to be held, fed on a schedule, kept warm by someone who knew what they were doing. I told my mother I was in the emergency room with broken bones and I needed her. And my mother, the woman who raised me, who I had supported financially for nearly a decade, said, and I will never forget these words for as long as I live, "Your sister never has these emergencies." She had a Caribbean cruise. That was her response. My sister Bree was on a 10-day Caribbean cruise that she'd booked 3 months ago, and somehow in my mother's mind, that was the comparison she chose to make. Bree was floating somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico on a vacation. I was strapped to a hospital bed with a chest brace on, and my 6-week-old daughter was sitting in a neighbor's living room waiting for someone to come get her. And my parents were talking about a dinner reservation. I hung up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just hung up and stared at the ceiling of that triage bay for a long moment, listening to the sounds of the hospital around me. The beeping monitors, the rolling carts, someone coughing behind a curtain down the hall. And then I opened my phone and started making calls. I found a vetted emergency childcare agency through a Google search right there from that hospital bed. I explained the situation, gave them Diane's address, authorized a payment over the phone, and within 40 minutes a certified caregiver was at Diane's door. I coordinated the whole thing between x-rays. I arranged a car seat transfer, sent the woman Nora's feeding schedule via text, and made sure Diane had my hospital room number. I handled every single piece of it alone, from a gurney, with a broken collarbone. And while I was lying there waiting to be moved to a room, something shifted in me. Not grief, exactly. Something colder and more focused than grief. I opened my banking app and looked at the automatic transfer I had set up years ago, the one that went out on the first of every month without fail. $4,500. Every single month for 9 years. I had started sending it when my father lost his job and they almost lost the house. I kept sending it because I thought that's what good daughters do. I never complained, never asked for anything in return, never made them feel like it was a burden. Over 9 years, that money added up to $486,000. Nearly $500,000 of my money, sent to people who just told me to call a babysitting service. I canceled the transfer right there. No phone call, no explanation. I just canceled it and set my phone down on the bedside table. I was moved to a room on the 3rd floor around 7 that evening. The caregiver sent me a photo of Nora sleeping, curled up in her car seat in a clean onesie, looking so small and so peaceful that it made my chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with the broken ribs. I sent back a thank you and told her I'd check in again in an hour. It was around 8:30 when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Slow, deliberate footsteps, the kind that belonged to someone older. The door opened, and my grandfather walked in. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at me, the brace, the hospital gown, and his expression was something I couldn't quite read. Not pity. Something more serious than pity. He pulled the chair close to my bed, sat down, and said, He sat down, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, I heard what happened. All of it. I didn't ask how. My grandfather, Gerald Tanner, was 79 years old and sharp as a blade. He had a way of knowing things before anyone told him. Always had. He reached over and put his hand over mine, the one without the 4-line, and he just held it for a moment without saying anything else. That silence meant more to me than any words my parents had offered that entire day. Then he said, Your mother called me to complain that you hung up on her. I almost laughed. Almost. I told him exactly what happened, the accident, the phone call, what my mother said about Bree's Caribbean cruise, the dinner reservation, all of it. I told him about hiring the caregiver from the hospital bed. I told him about canceling the transfer. I told him everything, and he sat there and listened without interrupting once, which is something very few people in my family have ever been capable of doing. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You've been carrying this family for a long time, Paige. Too long. I felt something crack open in my chest when he said that, and again, not the ribs. Something else. Something I'd been keeping sealed shut for years. I had never once let myself say out loud that I was tired of it, that the monthly transfers had started to feel less like generosity and more like obligation, that I'd been quietly terrified for years that if I ever stopped, if I ever needed something in return, there would be nothing there. And now I knew. Now I had proof. My grandfather stayed for almost 2 hours. He helped me call the caregiver to check on Nora again, sat with me while I ate the hospital dinner I could barely taste, and when he left he squeezed my hand and said he was proud of me. He said it simply and without ceremony, the way he said everything, and I held on to those words all night. My parents showed up the next morning. Not because they'd had a change of heart. I could tell immediately from the way my mother walked in that she'd come to manage the situation, not apologize for it. She had that particular expression she wore when she felt she'd been wronged, chin slightly up, mouth set in a tight line. My father hung back near the door with his hands in his pockets, the way he always did when he knew my mother was about to speak for both of them. She started with the dinner. Explained it was a reservation they'd made for their anniversary, that it wasn't just any dinner, that I could have called someone else. She said she understood I was upset, but that I needed to understand her side of things too. She did not ask how I was feeling. She did not ask about Nora. She did not say the word sorry. I let her finish. Then I told her calmly that the monthly transfer had been canceled permanently. Not paused, not reduced. Canceled. I told her I had been sending $4,500 every single month for 9 years, $486,000 total, and that I had done it without complaint because I believed family showed up for each other. I told her that the night before, when I was lying in a hospital bed with broken bones and a 6-week-old baby who needed someone, she had shown me clearly and without any ambiguity exactly where I stood. And I told her I had adjusted accordingly. My mother's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock first, then something harder. She said I was being dramatic. She said one dinner didn't erase 9 years. She said she was my mother and I was punishing her. I told her I wasn't punishing anyone. I was simply making a decision about my own money based on information I now had. There was nothing emotional about it. It was just a decision. My father finally spoke up from the doorway. He said maybe we all needed to calm down. I told him as evenly as I could that I was completely calm. He had nothing to say to that. They left 20 minutes later. My mother didn't hug me on her way out. I noticed that, filed it away, and let it go. I was discharged 2 days later. My grandfather came to pick me up himself, drove me to Diane's to collect Nora, and helped me carry everything up to my apartment. He put the kettle on while I sat on the couch with Nora on my chest. Both of us finally home. Both of us finally still. There is something that nobody tells you about the moments when family fails you, that they also clarify things. Strip away the noise and the pretending and the decades of excuse behavior, and leave you with something clean and honest. I knew exactly who had shown up for me. I knew exactly who hadn't. And I knew, holding my daughter in that quiet apartment, that I was going to be just fine. Not because my parents came through, but because even when they didn't, I did.